Hey guys and girls, welcome to Target Suite's Gun Stuff for Newbies. Hi, George here, and yes, this is episode 1 of what I wanted to call Gun Stuff for Newbies. And today we're going to talk about the 2 major categories of handguns. And if you'll stick around for just a few minutes, I'm going to give you a sneak peek inside what a lot of people call a bullet. And why did I want to start a second weekly video series? My goodness. And the answer is because I read a statistic not too long ago that said over 7 million people bought guns for the first time in the United States in 2020. In 1 year, 7 million new shooters. And people that have never had a gun before. And then you throw that number in with over the last 5+ years of incredible growth in the shooting sports. There's just a lot of new shooters, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to jump in here and we're going to cover the basics of gun stuff and shooting on this channel. Now, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to be all tactical, and I'm not going to teach you how to do tactical things. Gosh, I don't even own an AR style rifle, nor do I own a polymer pistol yet. But I've got lots of guns we can talk about, and so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to cover the basics. We're going to cover some safety. We're going to cover nomenclature, some terms that a lot of guys and girls are not familiar with that get thrown around the gun community, and a lot of people don't even really know what they stand for. And so that's what this channel is all about. And so right now, let's just get started with our review of the two major categories of handguns. Well, we do have 2 classes of firearms here. We've got 2 revolvers and we have 2 semi-auto pistols. And this first one that I'm going to show you here, I featured in a video last Tuesday, and this is a Colt look-alike. It's actually a Ruger Vaquero, and it is a revolver. And then we have the Ruger SP101. It is also a revolver, and if you don't know why they're called revolvers, this is pretty basic, but that's okay. It's because they have a cylinder that spins. And the Vaquero, if I open the loading gate on the Vaquero, then the cylinder spins. And so that's the revolver. And these 2 firearms are called semi-auto handguns because they are semi-automatic. A fully automatic firearm is one where when you pull the trigger, it fires until the firearm runs out of cartridges. But a semi-auto fires one time every time you pull the trigger. And in this case, what happens with a 1911 is you pull the trigger, the gun fires, the slide moves back, cocks the hammer, and then you pull the trigger again, the slide moves, you pull the trigger, slide moves, pull the trigger. That's why this is called a semi-auto handgun. And the same thing is true with the high standard HD military. It's just a smaller version, but the function is the same. And both semi-auto handguns load through a magazine, and some people might call this a clip, but we're going to cover a clip in an upcoming Tuesday video when I feature an M1 Garand. So we'll talk about a clip then. But things that hold cartridges that go into a pistol or a rifle are called magazines. And so here we have the magazine for the 45 ACP, the 1911, and the advantage of a semi-auto handgun is that you can get versions that have very high capacity. You can put lots of cartridges in, whereas a revolver is generally limited to 5 to 8 rounds. The SP101 has a cylinder that only has room for 5 cartridges. The Ruger Vaquero, if I were to spin the cylinder, you would be able to, and count it, you'd be able to see that there's room for 6. And that's why a lot of people will call a revolver a 6-gun, because traditionally they had 6 rounds, room for 6 cartridges. And so I just wanted to give you a very quick and simple look at 2 different kinds of firearms, the revolver and the semi-auto. Now there's one big difference between these 2 revolvers. One is called a single action revolver and one is called a double action revolver. And the single double has to do with what is the function of the trigger. And so on the Ruger Vaquero, which is a Western style pistol, the trigger only has one function. I can pull all I want to, and this firearm is not going to fire, because all this trigger does is release the hammer. And so I have to pull the hammer back. By the way, I've already checked all of these guns for that they're clear. I have to pull the hammer back, and then I can pull the trigger. And now I can pull the trigger again all I want to, but it will not fire, because in order to fire, I have to cock the hammer, which rotates the cylinder, and then I can pull the trigger. And so the trigger has a single function. That's why it's called a single action. Whereas the Ruger SP101 is a double action revolver. The trigger serves 2 functions. Number 1, it cocks the hammer, and it also releases the hammer. And so it has two functions, the trigger does. It cocks the hammer and releases the hammer. It also rotates the cylinder in this case. But the double action, and it also has a single action function where you can cock the hammer with your thumb or finger and then pull the trigger, and it makes it easier to shoot accurately, some people would say. But this is a double action in that the trigger serves 2 functions. And so next week we're going to talk about the different kinds of semi-auto handguns, semi-auto pistols. And my SIG here, I'll give you a hint, is a single action semi-automatic pistol, meaning that the trigger only has one function, and that is to release the hammer. And so if I cock the hammer, pull the trigger, the hammer will fall. The trigger serves no other function but to release the hammer. So you have to cock the hammer either manually with the thumb, or it gets cocked when a round fires, and then you can pull the trigger. So this is a semi-auto pistol, and in next week's video we'll talk about the different kinds of pistols, because there are double action semi-automatic pistols, and we'll talk about that. But right now let's take a look at a sneak peek, as I said, inside what some people call a bullet. Okay, the first thing I wanted to say is that this is a bullet right here. This is a cartridge. This is a loaded round, ammunition ready to fire. And so when we talk about a bullet, technically we're talking about the projectile itself. And so a lot of people will say bullet, and I'm guilty of that occasionally, because I grew up watching Westerns when guys ran out of bullets. And so you'll catch me every now and then referring to one of these as a bullet, but it's actually a cartridge. And so I've got three different examples here. This first one is a centerfire cartridge. It's taken apart, and there is a primer, a cartridge case, and the bullet. And I've actually done a cutaway here on the case itself, and I'll see if I can get this to show up. But there in the back is the primer pocket right here. And there is a flash hole in the primer pocket, that little hole right there. And that flash hole allows the hot gases from the primer, when it is detonated, goes into the cartridge case, ignites the powder, the high pressure pushes the bullet out of the barrel. And so there is the cartridge case. And this particular primer right here has already been fired, and you can see that there's a firing pin dent in the back of the primer. And so those are the components of a center fire cartridge. Now we have the rim fire cartridge. This is a 22, and there is the bullet. You can see how much smaller that is than the 44 Magnum or 44 caliber bullet here that goes in my 44 Magnum. But this is a 22 caliber. This is a 22 caliber bullet. That is a 44 caliber bullet. The difference in weight here is 40 grains versus 240 grains. But this is the 22 rimfire is called a rimfire because it does not have a separate primer. And I hope you can see this in the cutaway. But in this little area right here where the rim is folded over on the inside, there's a little pocket that goes around the rim of the cartridge of the brass case. And that little pocket in there has the primer material. And the firing pin on a 22 or any other rimfire actually strikes the rim of the cartridge, and that's why there's a firing pin mark right there. That's what makes this a rimfire. So this is a 22 rimfire. There's not a separate primer. And I hope that showed up in the video. So when you have a loaded round, it's called a cartridge. If you have a bullet, it's actually the projectile is what we're talking about. And I've got a case right here that has no powder or no bullet, but it does have a primer. And I'm going to put my earplugs in. And I'm going to fire off this primer just so that you guys can hear what it sounds like. So I've got the Ruger SP101 case with a primer. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for episode 1 of Gun Stuff for Newbies on my Target Suite channel. I hope there's many, many more, and you guys be sure and join me in the comments if you've got questions or comments, things you would like to know that I don't cover. Of course, this is episode 1, so you don't know where we're going to go from here, but I hope that we've got many, many more to come like this, and I hope it's helpful. That's the intent of Gun Stuff for Newbies, is to help all you new shooters with terminology, things like that. And if I forget something, you veteran shooters, please let me know, and so I can straighten that out in a subsequent video. But anyway, thanks for joining, and I'll see you guys and girls